what we are witnessing today. The conference brings together world-class and highly respected experts to share perspectives and deliberate on topics relevant to the development of the financial services sector and the national economy. Our goal is to collate the conference proceedings for the publication of a book that will form part of GCB's 70th anniversary celebrations. This book will be a significant source of information, history, facts, serve as advocacy, and reference for practitioners, scholars, researchers, academics, policy makers, and policy analysts in Ghana and other parts of the world. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am very excited to have you all join GCB Bank's celebration of its platinum anniversary by contributing to this important conference. Please assist me in appreciating our presenters, discussants, and moderators who committed their personal time to thoroughly research over several weeks in preparing for this conference. They include Dr. R.G. Rajan, former governor of the Reserve Bank of India and University of Chicago, Professor Emmanuel Achampong from the Harvard University, Professor Tavneet Suri from Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, and Professor Vivian Afi Jokoto from Virginia Commonwealth University. There are many others, researchers and academics from global and local universities, industry experts, and contributors from our local banking institutions, including all three governors of the Bank of Ghana, who are playing significant roles in this very important program. We are very grateful to you all and deeply appreciate your contributions and participation. Our world, and for that matter, the banking sector, is going through rapid changes. And through these collaborative and innovative discourse, we will carve the roadmap to navigate and lead in these turbulent times. Today, we celebrate GCB Bank, Ghana's largest indigenous bank, for leading the Ghanaian banking sector in many ways. It has been the cornerstone of our national economy since it commenced operations in May of 1953 as the Bank of the Gold Coast. For 7 decades, this bank has assisted private, public institutions and individuals in achieving their goals and financial well-being, respectively. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the bank has achieved many successes and also encountered challenges, but it has shown great resilience and always recovered. We seek to show more of that resilience in our ability to support our customers to grow, expand their businesses, and support the communities in which we operate. Partnerships and engagements through discussions of this type will help shape our strategies for the future and provide economic literature for various stakeholders. Our focus on the digital transformation agenda, customer experience, risk management, investment in our human resource, and ESG will spearhead our growth into the future. To all our esteemed guests, I thank you. I really thank you. I cannot thank you enough. And I say, Ayiko, for gracing us with your presence. Your participation elevates this event, and we will deliberate to generate ideas and strategies to promote a resilient and inclusive financial services sector and economy. Once again, I welcome you all and say, Akwaba, you are all very welcome to this beautiful city of Accra and to GCB Bank, where our hospitality is second to none. I look forward to your active participation and hope for a very fruitful intellectual discussion. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference. I thank you all. Thank you.
I think he deserves a better round of applause for a number of things, for the brilliance of the speech, for also ably running this bank since you took over in the latter parts of 2020 till now, and for conceptualizing such a fantastic program. How many of you are excited to be part of this historic program? Put your hands together for yourselves one more time. Kofi Adomako, MD, GCB Bank PLC. So from St. Augustine's College, we're moving to Infantipim School. For those of you who don't know, Cape Coast used to produce the best secondary schools in Ghana until Achimota School came along. And then later on, another school took over. So Kofi attended possibly the third oldest boys' school in Cape Coast. The next speaker is the governor of the Central Bank, and he attended the first secondary school in Ghana, Infantipim School. And he's here not to talk about his school, but to endorse this program and also give us some words of advice ahead of this important deliberation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome remarks, Governor of the Central Bank, Chairman of Conference, Dr. Ernest Iyedu Addison. Please, it's a long walk, keep clapping.
Thank you very much, Mr. MC. Honorable Minister of State for Finance, Dr. Amin, First and Second Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Managing Director of the Ghana Commercial Bank, GCB. These days they don't want to be called Ghana Commercial Bank, GCB Bank. Board Chairman and Directors of GCB Bank, Professor Ernest Aite, former Vice Chancellor, Ambassador D.K. Osei, former Secretary to the former President, my friend and classmate, Kofi Ajipom Boateng, executives of the banking fraternity, heads of department, and staff of GCB Bank, associates, fellows of the Chartered Institute of Bankers, distinguished panelists and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to everyone. Let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to the management of GCB Bank for the kind invitation to chair this thought leadership conference under the theme 70 years of providing unrivaled financial solutions in the socio-economic development of Ghana. Since the launch of GCB's 70th anniversary in August 2023, the bank has executed multiple initiatives to commemorate the occasion, of which this Platinum Series conference forms a critical component. The theme chosen for this conference encapsulates the very essence of GCB Bank's firm commitment to Ghana's socio-economic development in good and bad times. As the largest indigenous bank in the country, GCB has over the past 70 years maintained its position as a systemically important bank in the industry, providing invaluable financial services to the Ghanaian populace and supporting economic growth. Probably more important than its size is the bank's efforts to support local private enterprises and promoting financial inclusion in Ghana. From customized financial solutions to stellar customer service, GCB has consistently exceeded expectations in meeting the diverse needs of its clients, be it assisting individuals to achieving their financial goals or aiding corporates in realizing their visions. The bank has demonstrated a steadfast dedication to its customers. In a climate where banking has been characterized by challenges and uncertainties, GCB has demonstrated a clarity of vision and resilience. Since its inception in the 1950s with a single location, its footprint has extended to cover over 150 branches and 11 agencies, making it the bank with the widest branch network spread across all 16 regions of Ghana, bringing its services to new and remote areas, thereby making financial services possible for many. The bank has also capitalized on the digital finance revolution, becoming the first bank in Ghana to launch a bank-led mobile money service, the G-Money, which currently serves more than 2.7 million customers. GCB's most recent contributions to the country's development agenda includes its role in driving the national agenda for financial inclusion and financial literacy. Secondly, contributing positively to financial intermediation as the second largest bank in credit extension. The bank accounts for 10.7% of total gross loans as of December 2023. And then the bank has played a key facilitator in Ghana's international financial trade with dealings in letters of credit, financing medium-term loans, export credit guarantee lines, etc. In March 2023, the bank executed Ghana's first successful Pan-African payment and settlement system client transaction. I must commend the bank for its commitment to innovation and continuous evolution in line with emerging trends in the industry. The bank demonstrated exceptional fortitude in the face of the COVID-19 disruptions and the challenging macroeconomic environment resulting in the implementation of the DDEP with its associated impairments. Undeterred by this setback, provisional audited returns reflect a significant improvement in the bank's performance in 2023, which will help close the capital gap created by the DDEP. Recently, GCB Bank has been adjudged the safest bank in Ghana by Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's, and was also voted the most compliant bank in Africa by the Association of Certified Compliance Professionals in Africa. This is a testament to the bank's unwavering dedication to exceptional value to all its stakeholders. Indeed, GCB's commendable achievements have set the pace in the banking industry, which shows that given the right conditions, such as governance structures and ethical practices, any indigenous bank, even a government-owned one, can perform well, even in the face of strong competition from their foreign counterparts. This conference presents an opportune space to brainstorm and share ideas that promote the development and resilience of the financial sector in Ghana. I am excited that the discussions today promise to cover vital issues around ethics, financial conduct, financial inclusion, mobile money, and the reinvention of finance in Africa. As demonstrated during the pandemic, digital innovation can be used as a catalyst for growth to boost recovery. Every setback offers the opportunity to strategize on ways to reinvent ourselves and build back better and stronger. In conclusion, let me commend GCB Bank for their tireless efforts in bringing this conference to fruition. The panel of experts promise will be undoubtedly stimulate our intellect and help reshape our thinking on the criticality of ethics, financial inclusion, financial regulation and conduct, and ultimately on the socio-economic development of Ghana in the years to come. I have no doubt in my mind that the bank will continue to chart new horizons, shatter barriers, and inspire change within Ghana and beyond. On this note, I wish you all fruitful deliberations, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Governor Addison. Please put your hands together one more time for him. We're particularly grateful because for a busy man and for a very difficult time like this, to have not only the governor agree to chair, but also to lease to us his two deputies, not to be spectators, but to play active roles in the program is really remarkable. As we've been hinted, the first deputy governor would be a contributor on the session 3, and our second deputy governor as well has a key role to play as moderator of another panel. Let's put our hands together for the team from the governor's office. We're so grateful to you. The next speech will be delivered by the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, and those people who are keeping the scores, Finance 1, Economics 1. But this is an interesting one because first speaker, of course, is a finance guy, is Mr. Adomako. Dr. Addison is an economist through and through. The third person is coming from the Ministry of Finance, but he's an economist. So the economists, we have 2, the finance people have 1. His MP for Karaga, Dr. Muhammad Amin Adam, is our Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance, and he will tell us where he stands on the economics finance conundrum. So good luck to you, Dr. Muhammad Amin Adam. We're happy to have you.
Bernard, I prefer to be called a politician. Yeah, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman and Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Deputy Governors, Chairman, Directors, Management, and staff of GCB Bank, Ambassador D.K. Ose, my father, the academia, some of who are my lecturers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be at this event to represent my boss, the Honorable Minister for Finance, the Honorable Ken Ofori-Atta, as the guest of honor for this very important Thought Leadership Conference. Let me start by congratulating GCB Bank on its 70th anniversary, which marks a celebration of this strong institution's contribution to the banking sector, the financial landscape, and the broader Ghanaian economy. GCB Bank has been key partner in supporting various sectors, including agriculture, manufacturing, small and medium enterprises, and thus fostering growth and job creation. As the first indigenous bank, GCB Bank has been at the forefront of serving individuals, SMEs, and both the private and public sectors, shaping the economic environment of our country. Let us all together extend our appreciation to GCB Bank for organizing this thought-provoking, I believe, event as part of their 70th anniversary celebrations. In today's rapidly evolving landscape, the financial sector plays a pivotal role in driving economic growth and fostering innovation. As a bank that is committed to excellence and innovation, GCB has recognized the importance of staying ahead of the curve and adapting to the changing dynamics of the global economy. The bank's enduring contributions to the socio-economic development of Ghana resonates well with all of us, and events like this exemplifies their commitment to continuous excellence. Ladies and gentlemen, As a government which advocates private sector-driven growth and development, events such as this and the many more that are expected in the future will help identify strategic anchors of growth for our economy that are more sustainable and also equitable. The financial sector, as we know, has faced some difficult challenges in the past few months. But however, they've also demonstrated resilience and patriotism during particularly the comprehensive debt restructuring program, which was aimed at restoring public debt to sustainable levels. This was a difficult but necessary exercise to help reduce the public debt burden. The DDEP, as we call it, was successfully completed with over 95% participation, and government remains grateful to the players in the financial industry and to Ghanaians who voluntarily participated in the program, and for the patience and cooperation during the difficult restructuring process. To mitigate the impact of DDEP on the solvency of the participating financial institutions, government, as we all know, has set up the Ghana Financial Stability Fund to provide solvency support to the affected financial institutions. But notwithstanding these difficulties, the industry's resilience has been demonstrated in the numbers put out after DDEP. For example, in Q1 2023, the banking industry profit after tax climbed by 45.8% to 2.8 billion Ghana cedis, up from 21.5% in April 2022. Net impairment losses decreased to 944 million Ghana cedis, but total assets grew by 22.6% to 238.2 billion Ghana cedis, compared to 24.8% growth in April 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, today the sacrifices and the commitment of government and Ghanaians have started yielding the expected economic returns. The economic indicators today demonstrate that indeed Ghana has turned the corner. The decline in inflation to 23.2% in December 2023 from a high of 54.2% in December 2022. Relative strong performance of the Ghana cedi, which reported a marginal depreciation of 7.2% between February and December 2023. In fact, in Ghana, 7.2% depreciation is a marginal depreciation. And if you compare this with the same period in 2022, you are talking about almost 30% depreciation. Overall real GDP growth of 2.8% for the first 3 quarters of 2023 is also remarkable. Apart from the fact that it is performing just as we did the year before, it is higher than the 2023 initial GDP growth target of 1.5%. Government will continue to play its part through restoration of macro stability and growth, and a more equitable and conducive environment for business operations and growth. The private sector is also expected to be innovative and creative, and to invest resources more strategically in these relevant areas to spur the needed growth of our economy. As we embark on this journey of exploration, let us consider the power of collaboration and collective intelligence. Today's challenges require a unified effort, bringing together the brightest minds to chart a course for the future. And by fostering a culture of thought leadership, we aim to ignite conversations that transcend traditional boundaries, sparking ideas that will propel us forward in the face of unprecedented change. Ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of collaboration, government launched the Ghana Mutual Prosperity Dialogues in November 2023. 2 partnership roundtables have subsequently been organized with Chinese and German business communities. These mutual prosperity partnership rounds are thus welcome platform for government and the private sector to continue to dialogue and to shape a more resilient future to drive job creation for the youth of our country and the needed economic growth. In the next hours together, we will delve into key topics that are reshaping the financial industry, from technological advancements like blockchain and artificial intelligence to the evolving regulatory landscape and the increasing importance of sustainability. I believe that our discussions will be thought-provoking and actionable. And so with great anticipation, I look forward to the enriching discussions, insights, and collaborations that will unfold during this conference. As we embark on this intellectual journey, let us remember that thought leadership is not just about ideas, it is about action. It is about translating ideas into strategies, innovations, and solutions that can drive positive change. May this gathering be a catalyst for further advancements in our banking and financial sectors. And I am here with the Chief Director of the Ministry of Finance, Eva, to assure you that the Ministry of Finance will continue to support the banking industry so we can grow our economy together and bring the much-needed development our people need from us. And so in conclusion, I extend my deepest gratitude to GCB Bank for your visionary leadership and dedication to the prosperity of our beloved nation. Let us make this conference a resounding success. And I have no doubt that with the caliber of academics and moderators and resource persons assembled here, we will leave here much rich in knowledge, in skills, in ideas, as well as in our mission together to drive our country to the next level of development. And so I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammed Amin. Adam, please put your hands together one more time for him. We're so grateful for you lifting the speech so nicely and giving us such a great thing to think about. We have a number of panels we'll be going into. There are 5 in all. Just to spell out the modalities quickly before we bring up the first moderator. So we have 5 sessions in all. We're aiming to do 3 of the sessions before lunch and then 2 after lunch. And we've structured the panel such that there's a moderator, there's a presenter, and then for some panels, there's either a contributor or a discussant or both, depending on the dynamics of the topic. So for example, for the first session, establishing the Bank of the Gold Coast, the long route to Ghana Commercial Bank, later GCB, we have the presenter, a contributor, and a moderator. 1 hour we've allocated for that. Second session is responses to an economic depression, lessons from the Gold Coast of the 1930s for today. Again, we have a presenter, a discussant, and a moderator. But for our pre-lunch session, which is the third session, the ethics, financial conduct, and political economy regulation session, we have a presenter, a discussant, and 3 contributors. So that's quite elaborate. So we're given a bit more than 1 hour for that. That's the pre-lunch session. And then, of course, we have the post-lunch session on the role of the central bank in today's world. And we're having 2 very important people, one here, the other joining digitally for that session as well. And then there's a final session on financial inclusion. We are just 10 minutes behind schedule. We're to get into the first panel at 10 o'clock, and it's 10 minutes past 10. So we're not that bad. We're hoping to make up within the lunch break. We will invite the moderators to introduce their key speakers, after which we will then change the setup of the stage, because the presenters would need to use the whole stage. So the team would rejig the stage after the first presenter does his presentation, and then from there we'll have the stage set up as well. Before I bring up the first moderator, I just want to go through some quick introductions just for the record and also for those who are listening to us and watching us online on our social media platforms. just to go through the names again. And when I mention your name, please give us a wave. We'll acknowledge you for the record. So we're very privileged to have, first and foremost, the Governor of the Central Bank, Dr. Ernest Addison. Please acknowledge his presence. Round of applause. Thank you, sir. First Deputy Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Maxwell Opoku-Afare, is also here with us. Thank you, sir. As is the Second Deputy Governor, Mrs. Elsie Ado-Awadzi. We just heard from the Minister of State at the Ministry of Finance and MP for Karaga, the Honorable Dr. Mohamed Amin Anta, here with us as well. Our host is the MD of GCB PLC, Kofi Adomako. Let's put our hands together for him. We also have the Chairman of the Board of GCB Bank PLC, Mr. Daniel Cheneboa Esirifi, here with us. We are privileged to have Ambassador, former Secretary to the President. I think he's also a historian. His books we've been reading these days because of the craziness in West Africa. Ambassador Dike Osei, please put your hands together. One of Ghana's most distinguished bankers, now Chairman of GATT, Albert Kobina Essien, also here with us. Thank you, sir. Distinguished economist, former VC of the University of Ghana, the eminent Professor Ernest Aite is also here with us. And by the way, Prof is a contributor to the first session, and I'm sure the moderator will do a proper introduction later on. There is the whole raft of people, senior people in finance, from economy, banking that are here, too many to mention. But what I'll do is just give you a quick flavor. We have, for example, Kofi Ejepon Boateng from the University of Cambridge. He is both a presenter and a moderator. Let's put our hands together for Kofi Ejepon Boateng, distinguished finance practitioner, economic historian as well. We're also happy to have Professor Emmanuel Champong, Harvard University, celebrated historian. I think it's at the other side. Where is he? Thank you so much, sir, for being here. Not to be outdone, Professor Noel Tego is also here with us. Let's put our hands together for him. So if you have a group of ladies, you say you have a bevy of beauties. So if you have a group of professors, what do you call them? A college of professors. So many. Professor Rimana Tiguba is here from the University of Ghana School of Law. Professor William Boateng, Head of Department, Economics, University of Ghana. Professor Ebo Texin, University of Ghana, Economics Department. Professor Robert Dakun Osei, University of Ghana. Too many professors. Let me just say, etc., etc. So many professors. We'll break the introductions into bits. We'll also introduce some people later on. It is now my privilege to invite a senior lecturer, Department of Economics, University of Ghana. She is an economist trained at Legon and Nottingham with special focus in labor markets, gender, international trade, structural transformation, and development economics. One of the faces of economic discourse in the media space, Dr. Priscilla Chumesi Bafo, your moderator for the first session. Please put your hands together for Dr. Chumesi Bafo. I usually question you as a moderator. Today you are doing my work. Good luck to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. Permit me to stand on the already established protocol as I swiftly introduce the speaker and the moderator to GCB's Platinum Thought Leadership Conference today. The theme for the first session is Establishing the Bank of the Gold Coast, the Long Road to Ghana Commercial Bank, later GCB. The two distinguished speakers we have bring unique perspectives to the theme. And for that reason, I will quickly go ahead and go through the profile in no particular order of the speakers. The contributor for the session is Professor Ernest Aite. Professor Ernest Aite is the Secretary General of the African Research Universities Alliance, Arua. He's a professor of economics, former Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana between 2010 and 2016. He was also the Director of the Institutes for Statistical, Social, and Economic Research, ISE, between 2003 and 2010. at the University of Ghana, and a director of the African Growth African Growth Initiative Story, Brookings Institution, Washington, D.C. Ernest Aite, strategic priorities as a Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana was to develop a university into a research-intensive institution that supports structural transformation in African countries. Please, let us put our hands together as we appreciate Professor Ernest Aite. The main speaker for this session is Kofi Agyapong-Boateng. Kofi Agyapong-Boateng is based at King's College, University of Cambridge. He is a research associate at the Center for Financial History at Cambridge and a distinguished fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, University of Toronto. Kofi is a trustee of the UK's Royal Economic Society. He also serves as a trustee for the National Institute of Economic and Social Research, Britain's longest established independent research institute. Kofi is a merchant banker by background and serves as a board on Pambro-Rombro Infrastructure Managers based in Stellenbosch and Helios Fairfax Partners Corporation listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange. This morning, Kofi presents to us on a presentation titled A Day at the Birth of GCB, 8th October 1952. Ladies and gentlemen, please let us welcome Kofi onto the stage as he presents.
Good morning, everyone. I'm here partly to test the equipment, so hopefully it all works. At least we know the microphones work. Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I think, Priscilla, you summarized it all. I stand on all protocols. Some of us aren't very good at these things. So welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My goal this morning is to give you a very, very short talk through the key aspects of the debate at the Gold Coast Legislative Council on the 8th of October, 1952. The Legislative Council, or LegCo, as our newspapers at the time referred to it, was a debating chamber that was established in the Gold Coast in 1850, just over 100 years before the date of the debate to which I'm going to refer. At the time it was established, LegCo had an advisory function. It was still a colony. So the British governor exercised all legislative and executive powers. LegCo simply provided him with advice. LegCo preceded our post-independence National Assembly, with which some of you might be familiar, which itself evolved through several republics to become our present-day parliamentary chamber, where our politicians engage. 8th October 1952 was the day on which the Bank of the Gold Coast Ordinance was presented to the House, to LegCo. The Bank of the Gold Coast, of course, was the predecessor to Ghana Commercial Bank, which was the predecessor to GCB. On that date, the bill was presented for its customary second reading. And so on that day, the House sat, debated the design of the bank, debated its governance, and debated its purpose. But before I take you to the debate itself, I first want to give you some background to how our country got to the point of even debating the bill. It's a very long history. I don't have the time, and you don't have the patience, I suspect, so I'll try and be quick. To provide context to the background, I'd like to draw your attention to a former Cambridge academic by name Keith Hart. I first met Keith in the mid-1980s. I was still an undergraduate. I went to visit Cambridge. Keith was an anthropologist. Many of you may be familiar with his name, but even those of you who do not know him may feel indebted to him for one not insignificant reason. Keith introduced into our lexicon the term informal sector. He introduced this term into common usage with a publication in 1973 entitled Informal Income Opportunities and Urban Employment in Ghana. The paper was based on research that he did in Nima and other parts of Accra. Today we hear the term informal sector being used in everyday language. Like most good things in life, the term can be traced to Ghana. But I mentioned Keith here in a very different context. In 1986, Keith wrote an article for a journal published by the Royal Anthropological Institute entitled Heads or Tails, Two Sides of the Coin. This article argued that if one looks at most currencies around the world, they tend to reflect heads, which Keith associates with political authority, say the head of a sovereign, if it's a monarchy, some symbol of political power, if it's a republic. And on the other side, tails, which he associates with quantitative value and market exchange. The sovereign might deem the currency to have one value. The market, however, might deem it to have quite a different value. The two tensions, that interplay, is what he deemed heads or tails. As background to the 8th October 1952 debate, I would like to very, very quickly run through the two dynamics in the Gold Coast and Ghana, heads and tails. It's customary to start with heads. Whenever one is flipping a coin, say heads or tails. So let's be a bit bold this morning and start with tails. GCB, in my opinion, GCB was the product of market dynamics. To my mind, the story starts in the late 17th and 18th centuries in the coastal and Akan regions in West Africa, as well as in Britain. In the Akan parts of modern-day Ghana, under Osei Tutu, whose reign we estimate ended in around 1712, his advisor, Okomfo Anoche, introduced laws to make gold dust the legal tender of Ashanti. Because of this, one could trade in cowries or foreign currencies outside of Greater Ashanti, but within Ashanti itself, all trade had to be in gold dust. Sorry, shows I'm not good at this. When I mentioned heads or tails, I meant to put up these two examples. This is a coin called Aki. It was the first coin used in this part, in the Gold Coast. This particular coin is from 1750, and it shows exactly what Hart was referring to, some sort of imperial figure on one side and the influence of the market on the other. It talks about free trade on the other. This is one of our own coins much later. We've got the cowrie on one side, which obviously nothing symbolizes the market better than cowries, and on the other we've got some symbols of political power. So this is an example of Keith Hart's heads or tails point. And if you look across the world, you look at many coins, they reflect this. So this is the right slide for what I'm about to say. So Okomfo Anoche, we couldn't find any pictures of him. so this is a monument that some of you might recognize. So one day we'll find some pictures. As I say, he introduced legal tender in the Gold Coast. Gold dust became the currency for trade. You couldn't even sweep the markets in Kumasi. It was against the law because they didn't want gold dust to end up anywhere other than in the state's hands. The capital punishment was introduced at the time to anyone found mixing their gold dust with impurities. And anyone found to be doing this was executed. There were circumstances in which the Ashanti state turned a blind eye to debasement, but I won't go into those here. One must also remember that the Ashanti Kingdom paid particular attention to the circulation of money within the kingdom. The expenditure on funerals, state festivals, state banquets, these were all mechanisms to ensure that money continued to circulate within the kingdom. In Britain, the scientist Isaac Newton was plucked out of Trinity in Cambridge and appointed Master of the Royal Mint. Most of us know the name because of his scientific work, but in 1696, he was appointed Master of the Royal Mint. He faced the same situation with English coinage that Akomfo-Anokye and others later faced in the Ashanti region, which was that the currency was being debased. And if you look at a British coin, up until today, you see lines around the coin. And the reason was, in those days, the coin contained bullion, so they used to shave the ends, collect the gold dust, or the bullion, silver dust, whatever it was, and then sell it. And those people were known as shavers. They used to debase the currency in that way. There was a coinage crisis in Britain as a result. So what did Isaac Newton do? He implemented the death penalty. Anyone found debasing currencies was sentenced to death in Britain. Both Akomfo-Anokye and Isaac Newton had the same solution for the same problem. If a currency loses its value because of counterfeiting, and I have to emphasize, because of counterfeiting, then that individual was executed. The introduction of legal tender was an important part of the evolution of societies. In England, Bank of England banknotes became popularized during this time. They over time dominated British currency. In the Ashanti area, gold dust obviously was the legal tender, and all other currencies were excluded. Come 1807, the British Parliament abolishes British involvement in the slave trade. This forces the Ashantis through the Gold Coast to trade with Europeans using gold dust. Fortunately for them, the Sokoto Caliphate was created in 1804, which covered a wide area in northern Nigeria, but also parts of modern-day Burkina Faso. And the Caliphate banned alcohol, and so needed cola. So the Ashanti traders used to sell cola to the north, bought labor, used the labor in the gold mines in the Akan areas, expanded gold production, and used the gold for European trade. But unfortunately, they couldn't increase gold production to the extent required, and there was a money supply crisis in the Ashanti area. To make things worse, in 1831, a treaty was entered into between the English and the Ashanti, whereby the trade routes were protected. And Fanti traders, Chapman Grant, John Saba, took advantage of the problems in the global rubber industry, worked with Ashanti commoners who extracted wild rubber from the forests, and they turned the Gold Coast into the fourth largest rubber exporter in the world. These same Fanti merchants, when rubber prices started to decline, started to work with Akan chiefs to mechanize the gold mining sector, Takwa, Obuasi, and other places. This was between 1899 and 1902, when the Boer War in South Africa drove capital out of their mining sector, drove expertise out, and that's what opened up the West African gold mines. What did all this mean? What it meant was between 1886 and 1911, the amount of currency in circulation in West Africa was about as much as the amount of currency in circulation in Britain. This is a table from Albert Adomakon's 1965 work, Kofi's uncle and our former governor. And what it shows is that if you look at 1886 to 1890, the difference between currency in circulation in the UK and currency in circulation in West Africa, and by West Africa, we're really talking about the Gold Coast and Nigeria. The difference was quite large. By 1901, and certainly by 1911, it has shrunk. This gives you some sense of the size of the economy that these entrepreneurs, these merchants had built in the late 19th century and very, very early 20th century. All of this economic activity increased the demand for currency and the demand for credit. The level of monetization led to the creation of what was called the West African Currency Board. For some reason, the British had this thing in their heads. It started around 1848, where they believed that at some point, West Africans, particularly the Gold Coast and parts of Nigeria, would stop using money, and that all of this currency would flow back to Britain and destabilize the British economy. Why they thought that, God knows, and there were several parliamentary hearings at which this was repeated. So anyway, as a result of that, they decided to introduce a West African currency, because a lot of this was British silver. They decided to introduce a West African currency which would remain in West Africa. Then come the First World War. During the First World War, there had been pre-production of cocoa, pre-planting of cocoa before the war, as a result of which, during the war, our cocoa production continued to grow. And the British Mint at the time, which still produced the West African coins, and was unable to keep up, as a result of which there were currency shortages in West Africa, similar to what had been experienced in Ashanti in the 19th century, was again being experienced by this time by the whole of the Gold Coast in the early 20th century. And that brings us to this gentleman. In 1934, this gentleman, Frederick Nanka Bruce, about whom, frankly, not enough has been written. Nanka Bruce, he was the nephew of Carl Randolph, who some of you might know of. He established a newspaper called the Gold Coast Independent in 1918, and he began to campaign for a national bank. He argued that the growth of the economy, tails, the pressure from below, the need for credit. The British banks that were operating in the country were not servicing West Africans, are not serving West Africans, either in the Gold Coast, Sierra Leone, or indeed Nigeria. So he began to campaign for a national bank. Alongside him was another gentleman whose picture, again, we can't find, Winifred Teteansa, who again began to publish articles calling for a farmers' bank, calling for a national bank. So in the 1920s and 1930s, the nationalist movement itself started to push for a bank. And that led to this quote, and I put it up here because I think it is quite important. One often forgets sometimes some of the characters who were involved in the early pushes for our banking system. And J.B. Dankwa, who's often associated with banking, says the following: I first read of the need for a national bank in the columns of the Gold Coast Independence 33 years ago. In those days, our venerable elder statesman, Dr. Frederick Nanka Bruce, proprietor of the Independent, was in the shoes that some of us are accused to stand today, troublemakers and inspirers of youth. When at last I grew up and got into politics, I found that Honorable Nanka Bruce was right. It was a public wrong that for so many years the people of this country had been deprived not only of a national bank, but also of the right to establish any bank of the sort. Because at the time, there was a banking ordinance that prevented any African from establishing a bank, hence this point. So Nanka Bruce, Teteansa, and I'll come to J.B. Dankwa and others later, but Nanka Bruce and Teteansa very, very much fought for this through the press, campaigned for it, and, if you will, symbolize that pressure from below to create a bank. Let me talk a bit about heads. So before I move to heads, let me put up this. This is a table from a gentleman called Francis Hutchison, which breaks down the roles that the Gold Coast elite played between the late 19th century, around 1880, 1890, and 1920. And what it shows is that 38% of the Gold Coast elite were involved in trade of some sort. 17%, 18% worked for the Colonial Civil Service, and 70% were lawyers. And then 30% were chiefs, and then it drops. So the pressure from below created by the size of this class turned into political pressure on the state to do something about the monetary system. So let me turn to the state heads. Politics by its very nature is inexplicable, but I'll do my best to join the dots, and I'll try and be quick. The colonial state demonetized gold dust and foreign currencies. They demonetized gold dust in the Gold Coast colony in 1880 and demonetized it in Ashanti in 1901. Demonetization put even more pressure on the demand for coinage. The creation of the West African currency board, as I've said, was inadequate. It didn't meet all the needs. But I'll skip that part of the narrative and move very quickly to 1947. Alan Burns was governor of the Gold Coast in the early part of 1947. He stepped down due to an incident and was replaced by Gerald Creasy. Burns stepped down around June 1947. Gerald Creasy came into office in January 1948. So for about 6 months, the Gold Coast was paying for two governors, neither of whom were in the country, and wasn't effectively being managed. Two parallel events occurred. Rising prices of European goods led to a boycott. The boycott was organized by this gentleman, Kwamina Boni. The boycott was organized on the basis that Europeans were manipulating prices, keeping up commodity prices, consumer good prices, and there were riots. These riots happened to coincide, and most of us know this history, with a demonstration by ex-servicemen leading in 1948 to a massive riot which spread across the country. People like my father, who went to Infant's Payment and the year before, in 1947, and his mates always referred to that period as their monsoon holidays, because all the schools were closed down, including the Accra schools, and the students were sent home. Those riots led to the publication of what was called the Watson Report. And the Watson Report was very wide-ranging, but one of the things that it talked about was the credit system. It blamed the absence of credit as being one of the reasons for, if you will, dissatisfaction within the Gold Coast. It also blamed a number of other things, the level of debt in the cocoa sector, and a number of other things. That's not a cue for me to leave the stage, is it? I hope not. So as a result, the British state had two documents. Well, first of all, it had a report published in 1949 by a chap called Patton, who in a modest way recommended that the country should set up a state bank. But he emphasized that it should really be focused on agriculture. Our nationalists, led by J.B. Dankwa, Nanka Bruce, and others, opposed that. They then forced the colonial government to set up a select committee as a subcommittee of LegCo. So this select committee sat between March 1950 and January 1951 and recommended that another report be done. So a second report was done by a gentleman called Cecil Trevor, and I think Emmanuel Achampong, in his talk, which follows our session, will speak a bit about that. And Cecil Trevor recommended that the country should have a national bank, much to the complete fury of the Bank of England. I mean, if you read the Bank of England correspondence around that time, it is almost embarrassing. You can almost feel the red faces when you read the documents. The reason the Bank of England were so opposed is they had had certain problems going back to India, going back particularly to Ceylon, to Sri Lanka today, but Ceylon as it was called, where they saw a national bank as a back route to a central bank. And they did not want central banks to be established that didn't have a certain, if you will, design. A gentleman called William Jackson, who worked in the Bank of England's Overseas and Foreign Office, wrote quite a powerful memo to his colleagues to remind them that Cecil Trevor had been appointed by the Gold Coast government, not by the Bank of England. And if Cecil Trevor was making recommendations that the Gold Coast politicians were happy with, the Bank of England would be wise to just go along. Besides, he argued, the Gold Coast is on its way to independence. You can't rule from the grave. It was against this background that the colonial administration agreed that a state-owned bank should be set up. But they insisted it had to be headed by a European. So in April 1952, after a long search, a gentleman called Alfred Eggleston, who I hope, these are the two reports that I referred to. We can skip that. For some reason, there he is. So Alfred Eggleston was appointed as the new managing director, appointed to lead, if you will, the preparations for a state-owned bank. So very quickly in what I've been saying, I've introduced the concepts of pressure from below and state decisions from the top. And it's this combination of circumstances that led, if you will, to the introduction of the legislation that I'm going to tell you about in a minute. The legislation was presented to the Legislative Council by this gentleman. He was our Minister of Finance at the time. If you recall, in the lead up to independence, 3 positions had been reserved for British colonial civil servants, with the rest of the positions being appointed by Kwame Nkrumah. This was after the 1951 elections. So this gentleman, his name is Robert Armitage, was our Minister of Finance. He had come down to the Gold Coast from East Africa. I think it was related to one of the East African governors. But nonetheless, it is claimed that he was promoted on merit. And he came down to the Gold Coast and became our Minister of Finance. So he presents the bill. Now, what's interesting, and I'll move now very quickly onto the debate itself, is that Armitage only relates the history 5 years prior to the bill being introduced. He doesn't talk about the fact that the Gold Coast was changing and required a national bank of its own. He talks about 3 things, which he highlights, and I'll try and be quick. He emphasizes that the bank should be controlled by the government. The government, he says, should own most of the shares, but he does say that at some point the government should consider selling shares to the public, but only when the bank starts to make a decent economic return. He proposes the name the Bank of the Gold Coast, which he says was a very good analogy to the Bank of England. He makes that point in his speech. But then goes on to say that it would not be a central bank. It would just be a commercial bank. He goes on to talk about, to argue the reasons why it couldn't be a central bank. And the reason he had to do that was because the chamber was quite agitated. They were expecting to have a commercial bank that had central banking functions. So they were quite agitated. And he went on to explain that, look, the Gold Coast was receiving most of its capital inflows because our monetary system looked like Britain. If we designed a central bank that looked different from the Bank of England, in other words, one that had commercial banking functions, it will have a negative effect on our flows. And he then went on to confirm that Edgerton had been appointed the new managing director. The chamber raised a number of questions, and I'll try and be brief. First of all, one E.K. Dutson, who was on the CPP side, made the point that they had to be included in the legislation, wording to the effect that the Bank of the Gold Coast would become the central bank. And he provided wording in the chamber. I won't read it all now. Kwesi Lamte, again CPP, a member of the legislature, made the same point. These two gentlemen, who were on the government side, or on Nkrumah's side, argued that the design was wrong and that the legislation had to include this transition. William Oforiatta, who was in the opposition, UGCC, again made the point that the Gold Coast would be better off, he argued, looking at Germany, looking at Europe, and creating an institution similar to their central bank, instead of looking at the Bank of England. To which Nkrumah shouted, "What about Russia?" To which Oforiatta concedes that yes, in the field of economics, we should copy Germany and Russia. And we'll be better off if we did that than copying the Bank of England, which led, if I can find it, to this article the next day. This paper was edited by Nkrumah saying, follow Russian and German methods, making fun of Oforiatta's statements. I do have some sympathy for what Oforiatta was saying, for reasons I wish I could go into, but in the interest of time, I will skip. Kwame Nabone, Kwesi Lamte, and others all pushed for GCB for legislation to include GCB becoming the central bank. They pushed for the bank having the capability to make long-term loans, all of which was denied. This push for GCB, or for the Bank of the Gold Coast, to become the central bank remained. And even after the Bank of Ghana was established in 1957, there were several board papers presented to the Bank of Ghana board in 1958 and 1961, again to the Bank of Ghana board, to the Ghana Commercial Bank board, all of which argued that GCB should be merged with the newly created Bank of Ghana. And in fact, the Nkrumah government were so confident that they would achieve this, that they did this. They went out and printed currencies, Bank of the Gold Coast currencies, because they expected to be able to force agreements through the legislature that the Bank of the Gold Coast would become the central bank. The Bank of England was opposed to it, the colonial administration were opposed to it, and through all sorts of means, and there's a long history on this, they managed to persuade the Nkrumah government to drop the suggestion. The power of the Bank of England to make a financial future. And he argues that that's the reason they gave up. So I'll wrap up.